generation that's growing up with lower self-esteem than previous generations. The other problem, to compound it, is we're growing up in a Facebook, Instagram world. In other words, we're good at putting filters on things. We're good at showing people that life is amazing even though I'm depressed, right? And so everybody sounds tough, and everybody sounds like they got it all figured out. And the reality is there's very little toughness, and most people don't have it figured out. And so when the more senior people say, well, what should we do? They sound like, this is what you gotta do. And they have no clue. Right? So you have an entire generation growing up with lower self-esteem than previous generations, right? Through no fault of their own. Through no fault of their own, right? They were dealt a bad hand, right? Now let's add in technology. We know that engagement with social media and our cell phones releases a chemical called dopamine. That's why when you get a text, it feels good. Right? So, we've all had it where you're feeling a little bit down or feeling a bit lonely, and so you send out 10 texts to 10 friends, hi, 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 because it feels good when you get a response, right? Right? It's why we count the likes, it's why we go back 10 times to see if my Instagram is growing slower, did I do something wrong? Do they not like me anymore, right? The trauma for young kids to be unfriended, right? Because we know when you get a hit of dopamine, which feels good. It's why we like it, it's why we keep going back to it. Dopamine is the exact same chemical that makes us feel good when we smoke, when we drink, and when we gamble. In other words, it's highly, highly addictive, right?
Nearsighted, and it can be hard to put your phone down. Take for example the game Candy Crush. As you play the game, you achieve small goals, causing your brain to be rewarded with little bursts of dopamine, and eventually you're rewarded in the game with new content. This novelty also gives little bursts of dopamine and together create what is known as a compulsion loop, which just happens to be the same loop responsible for the behaviors associated with nicotine or cocaine. Our brains are hardwired to make us novelty seeking, and this is why apps on our phones are designed to constantly provide us with new content, making them hard to put down. As a result, 93% of young people aged 18 to 29 report using their smartphone as a tool to avoid boredom, as opposed to other activities like reading a book or engaging with people around them. This has created a new term, nomophobia, the fear or anxiety of being without your phone. We also see a change in brain patterns. Alpha rhythms are commonly associated with wakeful relaxation, like when your mind wanders off, whereas gamma waves are associated with conscious attentiveness. And experiments have shown that when a cell phone is transmitting, say during a phone call, the power of these alpha waves is significantly boosted, meaning phone transmissions can literally change the way your brain functions. Your smartphone can also disrupt your sleep. The screen emits a blue light which has been shown to alter our circadian rhythms, diminishing the time spent in deep sleep, which is linked to the development of diabetes, cancer, and obesity. Studies have shown that people who read on their smartphone at night have a harder time falling asleep and produce less melatonin, a hormone responsible for the regulation of sleep-wake cycles. Harvard Medical School advises the last 2 to 3 hours before bed be technology-free, so pick up a book before bed instead. Of course, smartphones also...
Summer could be a good time to encourage teenagers to put down their phones and to enjoy some outdoor time. 50% of teens report that they feel addicted to their cell phones. A new study in the Journal of Child Development shows nighttime usage of cell phones can increase anxiety and depression in teenagers and even reduce self-esteem. This is the first study that shows a direct link between screen time and mental health. Researchers note that rates of anxiety and depression in young people have actually risen over 70% over the past couple of decades. Psychologist and CBS News contributor Lisa Damour is here. Welcome, Lisa.
Good morning.
Guru, parenting guru. I always get the best advice from Lisa, always. But this is fascinating because it's the first time it's looked at nighttime cell use and depression.
What's important about this study is that it shows us a pathway. We've suspected that there's a problem here. We've seen correlational studies. But this shows us that teens using their phones late at night leads to disrupted sleep, which leads to increased depression, emotional fragility, and sometimes acting out.
Does it matter what they're doing with their phones? If it's social media, if they're just texting, does that make a difference?
Well, we know that there are some things teenagers can do that are upsetting to them, but what's important about this study is even if they're having a great time, even if they're being super appropriate on their phone, if the phone is getting in the way of the sleep they need, it still causes harm.
Of adolescence. Why is this important? Almost every alcoholic discovered alcohol when they were teenagers. When we're very, very young, the only approval we need is the approval of our parents. And as we go through adolescence, we make this transition where we now need the approval of our peers. Very frustrating for our parents, very important for us. It allows us to acculturate outside of our immediate families into the broader tribe, right? It's a highly, highly stressful and anxious period of our lives, and we're supposed to learn to rely on our friends. Some people, quite by accident, discover alcohol and numbing effects of dopamine to help them cope with the stresses and anxieties of adolescence. Unfortunately, that becomes hardwired in their brains, and for the rest of their lives, when they suffer significant stress, they will not turn to a person, they will turn to the bottle. Social stress, financial stress, career stress, that's pretty much the primary reasons why an alcoholic drinks, right? What's happening is because we're allowing unfettered access to these dopamine-producing devices and media, basically it's becoming hardwired, and what we're seeing is as they grow older, too many kids don't know how to form deep, meaningful relationships. Their words, not mine. They will admit that many of their friendships are superficial. They will admit that their friends, that they don't count on their friends, they don't rely on their friends, they have fun with their friends, but they also know that their friends will cancel on them as something better comes along. Deep, meaningful relationships are not there because they never practice the skill set, and worse, they don't have the coping mechanisms to deal with stress. So when significant stress starts to show up in their lives, they're not turning to a person, they're turning to a device, they're turning to social media, they're turning to these things which offer temporary relief. We know, the science is clear, we know that people who spend more time on Facebook suffer higher rates of depression than people who spend less time on Facebook, right? These right? These things balanced. Alcohol is not bad. Too much alcohol is bad. Gambling is fun. Too much gambling is dangerous, right? There's nothing wrong with social media and cell phones. It's the imbalance, right? If you're sitting at dinner with your friends and you're texting somebody who's not there, that's a problem. That's an addiction. If you're sitting in a meeting with people you're supposed to be listening to and speaking, and you put your phone on the table, face up or face down, I don't care, that sends a subconscious message to the room that you're just not that important to me right now, right? That's what happens. And the fact that you cannot put it away is because you are addicted, right? If you wake up and you check your phone before you say good morning to your girlfriend, boyfriend, or spouse, you have an addiction. And like all addiction, in time, it'll destroy relationships, it'll cost time, and it'll cost money, and it'll make your life worse.
Right, as you know. So the question is what the advice from the experts
Sure.
then is on what to do with
Sure. So this is really hard. I will not say there are simple solutions.
Yeah.
So the first thing you can do is to try to get out in front of it when your kids are little. So put a power strip in your bedroom, have all the technology charge in the parents' room overnight, make that the default family habit. You will lose ground on this when you have a teenager, but if that's the default, it's easier to keep that ground. I think then the other thing is we have to model good habits. We have to be good about our own phones and our own technology and our own sleep. And then we can say to teenagers, look, if I'm protecting my sleep and not protecting yours, it would be like I got in the car and put on my seatbelt, but didn't ask you to put on your seatbelt.
And
We need this.
I was saying to you before, isn't it? This should be a problem for all of us. This isn't just a teenage problem,
This
right?
is not just a teenage problem. I mean, in many ways, adults are as deep in as their teens these days. But again, that's a place where we can say, look, I empathize. I know how hard it is to put down the phone. So we're not creating these rules for you, we're creating these rules for everybody.
And this